It's just a computer. You're being dramatic. My dad told me that after my sister smashed my $3,500 MacBook Pro. She did it because I refused to let her and her 5-year-old daughter move into my house after her divorce. At this point, you might think I'm selfish for turning down family in a time of need, but I had solid reasons for saying no. So, hear me out. Let me tell you what happened and how I stood up for myself when my own family tried to take advantage of me. Hello, everyone. My name is Kayla. I'm 30 years old and work as a software engineer at a major tech company in Austin, Texas. This story happened about 6 months ago, and to this day, I still can't forget what went down. It was a peaceful Saturday morning around 8:20 a.m. while I was leisurely making coffee in the kitchen. The doorbell suddenly rang loudly. Right after the first ring, as I was setting down my coffee mug and heading toward the door, the bell rang a second and third time in quick, urgent succession. At that moment, I felt a wave of annoyance rise inside me. I wondered who could be so rude as to press the bell that many times. I saw 4 people standing outside when I got to the door and looked through the peephole. Standing closest to the door was Kinsley, my sister, with a face full of urgency and restlessness. Next to her was Hannah, my 5-year-old niece. Behind them was my father, Owen, with a tense and determined expression, while my mother, Camila, looked helpless and worried. Seeing my entire family suddenly appear at my doorstep like that made me uneasy. Something in my gut told me something bad was about to happen. While I was still hesitating about opening the door, the bell rang again, loud and sharp, followed by Kinsley pounding urgently. As she banged on it, she shouted rudely, "Kayla, open the door. I know you're in there." With no choice, I opened the door. Instead of quickly inviting them in, I asked directly, "What's going on? Why are you ringing the bell like that?" Immediately, my dad spoke in his usual commanding tone. "It's urgent. Let's talk inside." At that moment, I turned to look at my mom, hoping to get a hint about the situation. With eyes full of helplessness and worry, she looked at me and let out a soft sigh, as if bracing herself for an oncoming storm. Not wanting to draw attention from the neighbors, I reluctantly stepped aside and let them into the house. As soon as she sat on the living room sofa, without any small talk or greeting, my sister got straight to the point. She said, "Daniel and I have decided to get a divorce. I don't have a place to stay right now, so Hannah and I will be moving into your house for a while." I was surprised by that announcement, not because she was getting divorced. That didn't shock me. What caught me off guard was how she said, "We'll be moving into your house for a while." She said it like my house was just some unclaimed property. While I was still trying to process what she said, I noticed everyone else's reactions in the room. My dad sat upright, hands resting on his thighs, eyes watching every expression on my face. It seemed like he already knew my answer and was preparing his next move. My mom sat at the edge of the sofa, head bowed low, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. Now and then, she glanced up at me, then looked away again, silently, praying for a good outcome she knew wouldn't happen. And Hannah, my sweet, innocent 5-year-old niece, sat close to her mother, her little legs swinging in the air, not even reaching the floor. She looked around my living room with wide, curious eyes, pointing at decorations and whispering questions to her mom. She clearly didn't understand the weight of the conversation, thinking this was just a regular family visit. After nearly a minute, I replied, "Your divorce is your business, and I'm not letting you and Hannah move in." When I refused, she looked stunned, like she couldn't believe what she just heard. Immediately, my dad leaned forward, his face tensing up. My mom shut her eyes tightly and breathed a deep, helpless sigh. Hannah stopped swinging her legs, sensing the shift in the room, but still not understanding what was happening. I'm not selfish, but my sister has crossed the line in my house too many times. I bought this house in February 2023 after 6 years of working, saving, and a little luck with crypto investments. Since I bought it, she's shown up more than once and completely disrupted my life. In April 2023, after a night out with her friends, she showed up at my door drunk at 1 o'clock a.m., ringing the bell nonstop. I let her in because I didn't want her out on the street in that condition. The next morning, I had to hire a cleaning service because she'd thrown up all over the room. By August 2023, she came over again with Hannah, who was just 3 years old. While I was making coffee, she left Hannah behind with a text. "Watch Hannah for an hour. I'm meeting a friend." She ended up drinking beer with her friend until late at night. Hannah kept crying that day. and I had to call Daniel, her husband, to take care of her. Around 10 p.m., she came back reeking of alcohol. Daniel and Kinsley ended up having a loud fight in my house. I had to threaten to call the cops before they finally left. After that, she even blamed me, said it was my fault for not taking good care of Hannah, and that's why she and Daniel argued. In April 2024, she showed up again with a few friends around 8 and 12 p.m. When I opened the door, she said, "Let us borrow your living room for about 2 hours." Seeing the beer crates and food they brought, I immediately said no and shut the door. She called me selfish and said I embarrassed her in front of her friends. Then in August 2024, she showed up again with 3 suitcases. When I opened the door, she said, "I just fought with Daniel. Let me stay for a few days." Seeing that she had nowhere else to go, I let her in. That turned out to be the biggest mistake of my life. She was messy and invited friends over to eat and drink beer while I was at work. After 3 days, I threw her bags out the door and told her to leave. That time, I also had to threaten to call the police. I refused when she asked to move in after announcing her divorce. I'm not letting a wolf into my home. I won't let my house turn into a dump or a daycare. After I refused, she started to get angry. She said to me, "Are you even human? Can you sit there and watch Hannah, your niece, not have a decent place to live?" After that manipulative line from Kinsley, I stayed silent. I didn't want to get into an argument early in the morning. I turned to look at Hannah. She was sitting quietly beside her mom, her big round eyes shifting between me and Kinsley, clearly confused about why the adults seemed so upset. She clutched her small doll tightly in her arms, maybe sensing the tension in the air. Looking at her, I felt a pang of sadness. None of this was her fault, but I also knew that if I gave in because of Hannah, Kinsley would use that to keep pushing and taking advantage of my kindness. After looking at Hannah, I turned to look at my dad. The expression on his face told me everything. I knew this wasn't over. She had brought him here for a reason. He wasn't going to let it go. And I was right. Less than a minute later, my dad spoke up, his voice full of authority. He said, "Kayla, you have to let Kinsley and Hannah stay here. They need a place to start over." His tone was heavy with pressure and favoritism. Like always, whenever Kinsley and I had a conflict, he took her side without question. That unquestioning loyalty brought back memories of a childhood filled with hurt. Ever since we were kids, Kinsley was my dad's golden child. He always defended and protected her unquestioningly and stubbornly. She's 4 years older than I, and by all usual standards, she should have been the one to share or give way to me. But in our family, it was the complete opposite. I was always expected to give in. Her birthdays were always celebrated grandly. She got to invite friends over and received expensive gifts. On the other hand, my birthdays were just simple dinners with a homemade cake from Mom and modest presents. Every Christmas, her gifts were always bigger, flashier, and more expensive than mine. When I was 10, Kinsley got a brand new bike with sparkling accessories, while I only got a small box of Legos. The following year, when her bike was worn out and she wanted a new one, Dad bought her another brand new motorcycle while I was handed down her old one. In our house, anything new automatically went to Kinsley. I got her hand-me-downs, bikes, laptops, school materials. Even when we both did something wrong, Dad's favoritism was blatant. I remember one time Kinsley broke Mom's favorite vase. When Mom asked about it, Kinsley blamed me. Dad didn't investigate. He immediately punished me and made me apologize. When I was 12, I finally asked him why such unfair treatment existed between us. He didn't answer my question. He looked at me coldly and said, "I'm feeding you. Don't ask for more." That's how I grew up in a household steeped in favoritism. My childhood was filled with wounds that never fully healed. Still, despite the hurt, I managed to live in that house with some joy because there was someone who truly cared about me. That person was my mom, Camilla. My mom is the traditional type of woman, and because of that, she carried a lot of emotional burden. My dad's word in our family was law, and I never saw her talk back to him. The moment he raised his voice, she would fall silent. While my dad blatantly favored Kinsley, my mom quietly tried to make up for it. Whenever my birthday was only modestly celebrated, Mom raised a little money to buy me a small extra gift. She kept these gifts hidden and gave them to me in private, just the two of us. I remember when I turned 13. After a quiet birthday dinner, she secretly handed me a small watch she had saved up to buy. She whispered, "This is a special gift, just from me to you." When I felt down about using Kinsley's old stuff, Mom would cook the dishes I loved most. She knew I liked butter toast with honey, so she woke up early every Saturday morning to make that special breakfast just for me. While Dad and Kinsley were still asleep, we'd sit together in the kitchen, quietly eating and chatting. Whenever Dad punished me for something Kinsley had done, Mom couldn't defend me in front of him, but afterwards she'd always find a way to comfort me. She would sneak into my room, gently pat my head, and say, "I know you didn't do anything wrong. Just be patient." She also made sure I had enough allowance at school. While Dad gave Kinsley money freely, Mom had to sneak it to me. She'd say, "You need money too, like the other kids." What meant the most was that she always listened. When I did well in school and Dad didn't care, she would quietly be proud of me and praise me. She kept all my high-scoring test papers in a small box, and sometimes she'd take them out to look at them with a proud smile. You could say Mom was the fragile thread holding us together. Back to my story once again. After my dad ordered me to let Kinsley and Hannah stay in my house, I looked him straight in the eyes for the first time. In that moment, all those years of being controlled, overlooked, and mistreated came flooding back. I felt a strange surge of strength inside me, like I had finally found my voice. Without hesitation, I said firmly, "No." My answer echoed in the quiet room, clear and decisive. Maybe for the first time in 30 years, I had said no to my father to his face. Immediately, my dad shouted, "You dare talk back to me?" His face turned red with rage. I could see the veins bulging in his neck, his eyes wide in disbelief. For years, he was used to everyone in the family following his commands, especially me. And now, someone dared to challenge his authority for the first time, so he lost it. Even so, I didn't waver. I felt an odd sense of calm, like all those years of holding back had led to this exact moment. I glanced to the side and saw my mom sitting with her head down, her hands trembling. She had to grip them tightly to stay composed. I understood she was scared. After years of living under his control, she had learned that standing up to him only led to worse consequences. But I also saw a tiny glimmer of hope in her eyes, like she silently prayed this time would be different. As for Kinsley, her face was a mix of shock and fury. She had never seen me stand up to Dad like this. In her mind, I was always the weak little sister, the one easy to push around and who always gave in. Now she was seeing a completely different Kayla. A few seconds later, I looked them straight in the eye and said, "The only person allowed to stay with me is Mom. Now I want the rest of you out of my house before I call the police for disturbing the peace." That line hit like a bomb in the room. Right after I said that, Kinsley jumped up like a beast being provoked. She pointed at my face and shouted, "You want to call the cops? Go ahead, do it." I saw a kind of madness in her eyes I had never seen before. She had completely lost control, and all those years of being defended, favored, and spoiled by our dad had built up an arrogance in her that couldn't handle being told no. Right after that, she grabbed my MacBook and slammed it hard onto the floor. It was the latest 16-inch MacBook Pro, which I had bought for over $3,500. That morning, before they arrived, I had opened it to get some work done before making coffee. I hadn't even had time to put it away. The sound of it crashing to the floor hit like an explosion. After the impact, the screen broke off from the base, the keyboard popped out, and the internal parts scattered across the floor. Seeing that, I completely lost it. I yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" In that moment, I truly felt out of control. That MacBook wasn't just some expensive device. It held all my work, meaningful projects, and personal memories. And now it was nothing but a pile of junk. After her throw and my scream, Hannah suddenly burst into tears, bringing the room into a chilling silence. Her crying was like an alarm, a wake-up call to remind everyone of what they were doing in front of a child. My mom rushed over to hold Hannah and tried to soothe her. I noticed her hands were shaking and even her voice was cracking from the emotion. At that moment, maybe realizing she had gone too far, Kinsley didn't yell anymore. She crossed her arms and said coldly, "Oops, it slipped." That line had no sincerity. She showed no sign of guilt or apology. Instead, she acted like destroying thousands of dollars of my property was just a minor accident. With that attitude, I took out my phone and started dialing 911. Before I could hit the call button, my dad suddenly snatched the phone from my hand. Looking at the numbers on the screen, he said, "You're calling the cops on your own family?" At that point, I had lost all control. I yelled, "Do you even realize how much data was on that computer?" Seeing how furious I was, I saw my dad go silent for the first time in my life. Usually he would have blown up too. But now, faced with the fact that I was seriously about to call the police, he hesitated. A few seconds later, he muttered, "It's just a computer. You're being dramatic." I laughed, a bitter, disappointed laugh. I said, "That computer cost me $3,500, and it holds company data. If I miss a contract, you cannot afford what it'll cost me." Hearing the price, their faces began to pale. I could see the worry starting to creep across both their faces, but my dad still tried to keep control of the situation. He said, "There's no proof Kinsley broke your computer." The moment I heard that, I knew he had already calculated everything. He believed they could avoid taking responsibility as long as they denied it. That was his strategy all along. Cover for Kinsley and blame me. I stared him down and said through clenched teeth, "Give me back my phone." But he still wouldn't give it back. He held it tightly like it was his last tool to keep control. A few seconds later, unexpectedly, my mom spoke up. "I'm taking Hannah outside. You all handle this yourselves." After saying that, she took Hannah's hand and led her to the front porch. Watching her walk out the door with Hannah, I felt disappointed. In that moment, I felt completely isolated. No one stood up for me. No one told them they were wrong. After my mom took Hannah outside, we stood in heavy, tense silence. I looked at the shattered MacBook on the floor, unsure of what to do. A mix of helplessness and anger welled up inside me. That MacBook wasn't just an expensive piece of tech. It was my primary work tool containing all my essential projects and all the code files I had spent months building. Now it was just a pile of useless junk at my feet. Then I made a move toward the door. I needed to get out of that room. I needed space to think and figure out what to do. But my dad had already seen it coming. He moved quickly and stood before the door, his body like a wall blocking my only way out. Looking me straight in the eyes with a cold expression, he said, "If you hit me, the whole world will see you as the daughter who attacked her father. You'll lose your job, lose everything." That threat completely shocked me, not because he threatened me, but because of how he did it. For 30 years, no matter how much he favored Kinsley or mistreated me, I always respected him as a father. And now, the man I called my dad was openly blackmailing me. He knew exactly how I thought. He knew I would never hit him, not because I was scared, but because of the moral values he and Mom had taught me since I was a child. And now he was using those very values to control me. I stood there feeling like I had just walked into a trap. If I tried to push past him, he could twist it into violence and use it against me. If I did nothing, I would stay imprisoned in my own house. A few seconds later, he said, "All you have to do is agree to let Kinsley and Hannah stay. Then we'll leave." That sentence made everything crystal clear. This visit had been planned. They didn't come to talk or ask. They came to impose their will on me and were willing to use anything to get what they wanted. After that, Kinsley said about the MacBook, "I'll pay you back. I need to stay a few months. Family has to help each other." When she said she'd pay, I almost laughed. She had just deliberately destroyed my property. And now she talked about compensation like it was some tiny accident, and she was still trying to manipulate me with the word family, as if what they had done to me was normal family behavior. And then there was a few months. I knew exactly what that meant. With Kinsley, a few months could turn into forever, and during that time, my house would no longer feel like my own. I'd be a guest in it. Aww. Facing their ridiculous demands, I answered bitterly, "No family tries to control each other like this." Just as I finished speaking, I heard the sound of a police siren in the distance. At first, it was faint, but it grew louder and closer until it stopped right in front of my house. The three of us stood frozen, looking at one another with different expressions. My dad looked surprised and nervous. Kinsley turned pale. Maybe she was starting to realize the consequences of what she had done. As for me, I felt a small flicker of hope. About 30 seconds later, I heard a car door open, followed by a male officer's voice. "Good afternoon. This is Officer Charles. Did someone here call 911? Immediately, my mom's voice rang out, clear and calm. "Yes, my daughter is being held against her will in the living room by her father and sister." So it was my mom who called the police. She hadn't abandoned me like I thought. She knew that if she stayed inside, she wouldn't be able to help me because she was afraid of my dad. So she used the excuse of taking Hannah outside to call the police without being noticed. At that moment, I felt a powerful emotion, gratitude, relief, and regret for having doubted her. She had chosen to stand with me, even though she knew it might bring serious consequences for her marriage. Then the front door opened, and two police officers entered my living room. They walked in with professionalism, eyes quickly scanning the situation. The taller officer, maybe in his 40s with graying hair, looked at me and asked, "Are you the homeowner?" "Yes," I answered immediately. He continued, "I am Officer Charles. Can you tell us what happened?" After that question, I started telling them everything in detail, and honestly, I told them about how they came demanding I let Kinsley and Hannah move in, how I refused, and especially how Kinsley had deliberately smashed my MacBook when I threatened to call the police. When I got to the part about the MacBook, my dad suddenly shouted, "Nobody broke her computer. She smashed it herself, and now she's blaming us." His sudden, loud denial made both officers turn and look at him. The younger officer immediately raised his hand and signaled my dad to quiet down. Then Officer Charles told him, "Sir, please remain calm. We'll hear everyone's side." Then he turned back to me and asked, "Can you provide documentation proving ownership of the house?" Without delay, I ran into my office, opened my drawer, and grabbed a copy of the property deed. My hands trembled slightly as I handed it to him, not out of fear, but from emotion. The officer carefully reviewed the papers. After a few minutes, he nodded and returned them to me. He said, "All right, we need everyone to come down to the station to give full statements. This is a serious incident involving property damage and possible threats." 20 minutes later, we were at the police station. My father glared at my mom. His eyes were full of fury. He probably never imagined that the woman he had controlled for decades would be the one to call the police on him. But under his threatening stare, my mom didn't look afraid anymore. She sat upright in her chair, hands neatly resting on her lap. She faced him with a calm that was nothing short of incredible. She said, "After this, I'm filing for divorce." That sentence hit the small interview room like a bomb. My father immediately snapped back in horror. "You dare?" The officer sitting across from us immediately stepped in. "Please stay calm. We're in the middle of a statement process." Only after that did they stop. The statement-taking process was detailed and tense. Regarding the part about my MacBook being smashed, my father and Kinsley strongly denied it. They claimed that I, in a fit of anger, broke the laptop myself and tried to blame them. My father told the officer, "This one's got a temper. She smashed the laptop and is making up a story to get back at us." Kinsley nodded in agreement and said, "That's right. Kayla has always had issues managing her emotions." My mom stepped in to defend me again, in the face of their lies. She looked the officer straight in the eye and said clearly and firmly, "They're lying." I saw Kinsley break the laptop with my own eyes. The moment she said that, Kinsley turned to her. Her eyes were wide with a mix of anger and betrayal. She shouted with a trembling voice, "Mom, I'm your daughter too!" And in that moment, I saw the pain on my mother's face. She knew her words had hurt Kinsley, but she also knew she couldn't keep covering up the truth. She responded with a voice that was shaky but resolute, "I stand with the truth." Watching my mom, the woman my father had controlled for so long, stand up and protect me, I felt a wave of something I hadn't felt in years. Validation. My father then said bitterly to the officer, "They're conspiring. She's always taken the girl's side." The officer wrote down every word carefully, but I could see the frustration on his face. Conflicting statements from family members made it nearly impossible to determine the truth. Then, unexpectedly, a small, clear voice piped up in the middle of all that tension. "Mom broke Aunt Kayla's computer." Everyone turned to the source of the voice. It was Hannah. She sat on a chair beside a female officer, her tiny legs swinging above the floor. Kinsley immediately shouted, "Hannah, what are you saying?" But the officer quickly raised his hand to silence her. He walked over to Hannah, crouched down to her level, and spoke gently. "Hannah, can you tell me what you saw this morning?" And she did. Even though she couldn't describe everything with adult-level detail because she was only 5, the police recorded her statement. She said in her innocent child voice, "This morning we all went to Aunt Kayla's house. Mommy and Grandpa shouted at her. Then Mommy threw her computer on the floor." And just like that, the truth became clear with that one simple sentence. A 5-year-old had no reason to lie. Her testimony became the most crucial piece of evidence in the case. Right after the police formally charged my father and sister with making threats and intentionally destroying property, their case was passed to the district attorney's office for prosecution review. After nearly 3 hours at the police station, we were allowed to leave. As soon as we stepped outside, my dad spoke in a bitter tone. "Well done, Camilla, dragging your husband and daughter into a police station. You've outdone yourself." My mom responded calmly but firmly, "Kayla and I have endured enough. This is the price you pay for your irrational behavior." Tomorrow I'm filing for divorce." The moment she said, "Divorce?" my dad yelled, "You dare divorce me? I'm your husband." His voice echoed across the parking lot, drawing a few glances from people nearby. But my mom was no longer afraid of his anger. She didn't say another word. She stood tall, looking him straight in the eye with unwavering determination. I knew then, this time, she meant it. Kinsley stepped forward and tried to hug Hannah, but my mom quickly pushed her hand away. She said firmly, "Get your hands off the girl." Stunned by her reaction, Kinsley froze. She couldn't believe the gentle, soft-spoken woman she'd always known could speak to her like that. Then, a black SUV pulled up in front of the station. The man who stepped out was Daniel, Kinsley's ex-husband. He looked tense and anxious. When Hannah saw him, she shouted excitedly, "Daddy, I'm here!" And she ran straight into his arms. Daniel knelt and hugged his daughter tightly, his eyes filled with emotion. Watching this unfold, Kinsley was shocked. She turned to my mom and asked, "Why are you doing this?" Mom replied calmly, "Daniel is a good father. While you figure out your divorce, Hannah should stay with him. You've only made her suffer." With a trembling voice, Kinsley said, "But I'm your daughter too." My mom looked her in the eye with a strange calmness and said, "Yes, you're still my daughter. But if you don't change, I won't have a daughter named Kinsley anymore." That was her final word. Kinsley stood there watching Hannah in Daniel's arms, realizing she had lost not only her husband, but also her daughter and her mother's support. We left soon after. While in my car, my mom asked if she could stay with me for a few days while sorting out the divorce. I replied, "You can stay as long as you want, but about the divorce, maybe you should think it through?" Hearing that, my mom told me she had wanted to divorce my dad for years. She couldn't take his temper anymore, but she had hesitated, not wanting us kids to grow up in a broken home. Now, she just wanted to set herself free. With a tired voice, she told me, "You know, I've been silent for too long. I thought staying quiet would protect this family, but it only worsened things." That was the first time I had heard my mother open up like that. I was moved, realizing she had endured far more than I ever imagined. As we neared my house a little while later, I told her, "Just come live with me. I'll take care of you." After that offer, Mom smiled, her hand stroking my head like I was a kid. In her eyes then, I saw a sense of relief. Coming home with me that evening wasn't just my mom, it was also Daniel and Hannah. After I cleaned up the living room, picked up the shattered pieces of the MacBook, and put everything back in place, I made coffee for my mom and Daniel. Hannah sat on the rug, playing with the toys Daniel had brought in the car. There, Daniel thanked my mom for calling him. He said, "Thank you for thinking of Hannah. I don't know what I would have done without you." Then my mom explained why Daniel and Kinsley's marriage had fallen apart. Daniel had worked hard for years, juggling 2 jobs to support the family. But Kinsley never saw that. Instead of working with her husband to build a future, she spent money on unnecessary things, expensive clothes, bar hopping with friends, and lavish vacations. And worst of all, she had cheated. Hearing all this from my mom, I finally understood why Daniel looked so tired and broken. That's why, after the police station, my mom called him to come pick up Hannah. The little girl needed to be with a good father. When my mom finished telling the story, Daniel sat silently for a long moment. He looked down at Hannah playing on the floor, eyes full of love. After a while, he quietly said, "Thank you." Then my mom added, "I'll testify in court so you can get full custody of Hannah. I want her to have a good life." Hearing that, Daniel replied quickly, "Thank you. I'll bring Hannah to visit you often." When Daniel left with Hannah, I turned to my mom with a surprised look. I asked, "You don't regret it, do you?" She answered firmly, "No, I'm only doing what's best and what's right for Hannah." After Daniel and Hannah left that afternoon, my mom and I visited Attorney Vincent. He was a well-known lawyer specializing in unilateral divorces and civil lawsuits. His office was on the 15th floor of a tall building with a panoramic view of the entire city. When we stepped inside, I was immediately impressed by the professionalism of the workspace, towering shelves of legal books, a solid oak desk, and walls lined with awards and certifications. Attorney Vincent was a man in his early 50s, thinning silver hair, and sharp eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. He listened to our story attentively, occasionally jotting notes into a black notebook. My mom was there to consult him about filing for a one-sided divorce. She explained that the marriage had become toxic and that after what happened today, she could no longer live under the same roof with my father. Attorney Vincent carefully laid out the divorce process in Texas, including the waiting periods and how joint property would be divided. As for me, I was there to consult him about filing a civil lawsuit against my sister for deliberately destroying my MacBook and the valuable data stored on it. I explained that the laptop wasn't just worth $3,500, it also contained crucial work files that could affect ongoing projects. Attorney Vincent responded, "This is a clear case of intentional property damage. With testimony from your mother and the child, we have a solid legal foundation." He then walked me through the necessary steps, collecting evidence, estimating the damages, and preparing the legal documents for filing. He also explained that the existing police records for Kinsley and Owen would strongly support the civil case. As we left the office, my mom and I felt more confident about the path ahead. A week later, they showed up at my house again, but this time there was no surprise. I had already expected it. My dad came because of the divorce. He had just received notice from the court about the unilateral petition my mom had filed. My sister came because she had received a formal demand to pay $10,000 in damages for my MacBook and the resulting impact on my work. Unlike last time, I didn't let them inside. I stood at the doorway, making it clear there was a boundary. My mom stood behind me, no longer trembling like she once did. My dad demanded my mom withdraw the divorce papers using his usual commanding tone. "Camilla, cancel that damn petition now. You can't divorce me." Kinsley, on the other hand, came just to yell at me. She screamed, "Are you out of your mind? You're suing me for $10,000 over a laptop?" I stayed silent, not responding to her shouting. I had learned by now that arguing with people like them was a waste of time and energy. Standing beside me, my mom shook her head firmly. She told my dad, "I'm not canceling anything. My decision is final." Seeing she wouldn't back down, my dad resorted to threats. "You think you can survive without me? You'll end up with nothing." Kinsley kept yelling about how I was destroying the family and taking petty revenge by suing her. Sensing the tension rising, my mom gave me a signal to call the police. As soon as I picked up my phone and started to dial 911, they both immediately shifted their tone. My dad said, "No need to call the police." Kinsley also stepped back, forcing a smile as she said, "We just came to talk, that's all." And with that, they left, because they knew if the police showed up again, things would only get worse for them. After that incident, they stopped bothering me and my mom. Maybe they finally understood that further action would only make things worse for them. 2 months later, my parents' divorce hearing occurred at the family court. Since there were no disputes over property and my mom had prepared all the necessary documents, the hearing was over in just 60 minutes. The judge declared that my parents' 35-year marriage was officially over. I sat in the courtroom that day, watching my mom sign the final papers. She looked far more at ease, as if a huge burden had been lifted from her shoulders. My dad sat on the other side of the room, his face pale and full of disappointment. My civil case against Kinsley went to trial a month after their divorce. I had prepared thoroughly for this one. I presented the purchase invoice for the MacBook, a damage report from my company, and most importantly, testimony from my mom and a video recording of Hannah's statement at the police station. Faced with undeniable evidence, the court ordered Kinsley to pay me $10,000. That included $3,500 for the MacBook and $6,500 for damages to my work, lost data, and project delays. Watching Kinsley sign the court order with a pale face, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt relieved that justice had been served. The criminal case followed a month later, a trial for their actions involving threats and property destruction. Both my dad and sister faced stern judgments from the court. My dad received a 6-month suspended sentence and a criminal record. That meant if he reoffended within 2 years, he'd serve real jail time. My sister, who had directly smashed my computer, was sentenced to 2 years of probation, local supervision, a formal record of the incident, and 50 hours of community service. She was also legally prohibited from contacting me for the next 3 years. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I felt something close to peace. Justice had finally been delivered, and I could move on with my life, free from the fear of being mistreated by my own family. It's been 6 months since the day they came to my house and smashed my MacBook. Life now looks completely different. My mom lives with me, finally enjoying the peace she was denied for so many years. After the divorce, she sold the old house and split the assets 50-50 with my dad. She invested in a few retirement funds with that money and still had a comfortable amount left over. Seeing her rediscover parts of herself she had buried for decades brings me the most joy. She joined a local library book club, took morning yoga classes, and even signed up for a cooking course. Our mother-daughter relationship has never been stronger. We make coffee together every morning and talk about everything under the sun. As for my father, Owen, his life is the complete opposite. He now lives alone in a small apartment in a rougher part of the city. Having a criminal record ruined his reputation in the community. Old friends distanced themselves once they learned about the threats he made and how he allowed his daughter to destroy my property. He's tried reaching out to both me and my mom several times, but we've declined every time. I've heard his health is declining due to stress and loneliness, but I don't feel guilty. These are the consequences of his own choices. Kinsley is also struggling. She lost her job because of her criminal record and now scrapes by with low-paying temp work. She lives in a small rented room and can only see Hannah twice a month under court order. What's sad is that Kinsley still hasn't taken responsibility. She blames me, says I destroyed the family and got revenge in the pettiest way. She still can't see that her actions were the root cause of everything. Meanwhile, Daniel and Hannah are thriving. Daniel was granted full custody, and he's doing a fantastic job as a single dad. Hannah grew up healthy, happy, and always excited whenever she visited us. Among the extended family, opinions are divided. Relatives on my dad's side blame me. They say I'm cruel, ungrateful, and that I tore the family apart. They believe I was the reason for the family breaking down. But my mom's side of the family supports us. They say we did the right thing. So now I'll leave it to you. Do you think I was the one who broke my family apart? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it. Thanks for following along.